Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Loving Mr. Darcy, Journeys Beyond Pemberley, by Sharon Lathan, narrated by Corrie James. Chapter 1. Hertfordshire. Elizabeth Darcy stood next to Georgiana on the massive portico before the main doors to Pemberley. They were dressed in their travelling clothes, and were waiting patiently for the master of Pemberley, who was currently speaking with his steward, Mr. Keith, while the grandest and plushest of the Darcy carriages waited in the drive. The warmth of May in Derbyshire had set in full force, making the days radiant with bright sunshine until late into the evening. The vast gardens of Pemberley were responding to the weather as Mr. Clark and his staff diligently engineered the grounds, which were now bursting into nearly eye-piercing splendour with every colour of the rainbow. Every species of tree indigenous to England, and many that were not, enhanced the landscape, with diverse shades of green and leaves in a multitude of shapes and sizes. Lizzy had regained her strength and mobility by traversing the miles of pathways weaving through the varied gardens. The by-product of her wanderings was a familiarity with, and a deepening love for this place that was now her home. Lizzy dreamily mused at how tremendously she had changed in the nearly 5.5 months since she ascended the steps to Pemberley as a nervous bride. Outwardly, her entire appearance was drastically altered. Gowns, jewels, and furs beyond her vaguest imagining 6 months ago were now typical. Her hair, even in its travelling coif, was superior to anything she had ever fashioned previously. She was largely unaware of it, but there was a serenity and grace to her bearing that had not been present before. She would forever laugh spontaneously and carry a ready quip on her lips, but her character was notably more refined and softened. The minute gestures and vocal intonations associated with the social etiquette of the upper classes had permeated her being unconsciously. Inwardly she recognized a happiness and contentment that anchored her soul. Although there remained an enormous amount of Pemberley's management and the Darcy business affairs that she did not understand, her role as mistress of Pemberley was a comfortable and accepted one. Her place in the household and the community was firm, and her confidence was secure. This massive house, which had frankly frightened her to death initially, was now home. She no longer walked through the endless halls with feelings of paralysing awe and unworthiness. In 5 short months she had grown to love the manor and its surrounds with a devotion transcending anything she had ever felt for Longbourn. Already she missed the library and bedchamber and sitting-room, and well, all of it. The approximately 6 to 7 weeks of their planned absence stretched before her as an empty sadness, despite her excitement to see her family, and it was necessary to exert every ounce of self-will not to rush inside for one last glance. At that moment her husband strode out the door with the purposeful and powerful gait uniquely his own, mean and tense and serious, as he imparted a few last-minute instructions to his steward. He paused as Mr. Keith commented about something. Lizzy smiled in admiration at the picture he presented, commanding all to attention as he stood with shoulders back, masculine 6'3" frame erect, and impeccably dressed. He was elegant and regal, with sonorant voice authoritative. Pure, potent love and incredible pride burst through her as a wave. All that she had become in these past months was due to him. His love for her, his devotion and respect, his loyalty and faith in her capabilities, his steadfastness and latitude, and mostly his intuitive comprehension of her temperament, perceptions and requirements, encouraged her to blossom into the woman she now was. He nodded in finality, shook the steward's hand, and turned to his sister and wife. Instantly his face lit with a beaming smile, and although no less noble or masterful, his countenance softened considerably. "My dears, are you ready?" "Waiting for you, brother." "Come then," he said, offering an arm to each of his 2 favourite women in the entire world. He assisted Georgiana into the carriage first, made sure she was settled comfortably, and then turned to Lizzy, inquiring with deep concern, "Are you well, beloved?" "I am fine, William. Do not fuss so." She patted his cheek and took his offered hand. Leaning close and wholly indifferent to the hovering servants, he kissed her forehead. "I will fuss whether you wish it so or not, Mrs. Darcy. Therefore you may as well own to any discomfort you have immediately, to save me perpetually questioning." He assisted her into the carriage, following behind as she laughed. The truth was that she had been increasingly indisposed for the past 5 days. She had attempted to hide her infirmity from Darcy, but this was a fruitless endeavour. His eagle-eyed scrutiny and intimacy with all matters regarding his wife penetrated any guile she ventured. The physician had examined her yesterday and confirmed that which they had presumed. She was definitely with child. Despite previously harbouring little doubt, the Darcys greeted the validation with jubilance. Although her queasiness and extreme fatigue prevented her from actually jumping for joy, her heart was leaping. Darcy was nearly beside himself with euphoria, and only Lizzy, pleading with him to enlighten their families first, kept him from informing all of Derbyshire. The doctor had given her a clean bill of health, assuring them both that her symptoms, albeit difficult, were totally standard. He guessed that the worst of her nausea and lethargy would pass in a month or so, at about which time quickening would occur. He had spoken to them both at length and bluntly as to what to expect. As for the trip itself, he saw no reason to postpone or cancel, merely urging them to take it slowly. In light of the occasional mild headaches Lizzy suffered as a lingering effect of her trauma, coupled now with pregnancy, it was wise and essential not to overextend. With this in mind, Darcy had plotted the normally 1-day trip to Netherfield as a 2-day journey, departure planned for mid-morning when Lizzy usually felt better. So here they now were, at nearly 11 o'clock, and finally pulling out of the long Pemberley drive. The 2 carriages with their luggage, Samuel, Marguerite, and Mrs. Annesley, had left earlier. A courier had been dispatched to London the week prior to prepare Darcy House, and another to Hertfordshire for the Bingleys and Bennets. Lizzy sat close to Darcy, gazing out the open window until Pemberley, with Mr. Keith and Mrs. Reynolds waving their adieus, completely disappeared from view. With a heavy sigh she nestled under his outstretched arm, and he hugged her tightly. "I miss it already," she said. "I always feel that way too," Georgiana replied, "until I get to London. There is so much to entertain. The symphony, the plays, the park across from our townhouse, the little paddle boats on the lake—" "The shopping?" Darcy interrupted with a grin. Georgiana blushed. "Yes, the shopping as well, although it is you, dear brother, who insist I obtain new gowns and the like. In the end you buy more for me than I acquire for myself." Lizzy laughed. "Somehow that does not surprise me." Darcy was unfazed. "I shall not apologize in providing for and spoiling the women in my life."
"Elizabeth, you will so enjoy the shopping. We can purchase baby items. Oh, how wonderful it will be!"
Georgiana glowed and clapped her hands in enthusiasm. The elder Darcy smiled indulgently. Lizzy, too weary and queasy to visualize tromping through the clogged odoriferous streets of London as anything less than horrible. In truth, she was taking this entire excursion 1 step at a time. Currently she only focused on seeing her family and proudly being squired about by her handsome husband. As shameful as the emotion was, she experienced fresh surges of vanity at how wonderful he was in every conceivable way, as far as she was concerned, and how amazing that he belonged to her. She glanced up at his face as he exchanged pleasant conversation with his sister. his lush voice vibrating through her body where she pressed against his side. 6 months ago, she thought her love for him stronger and deeper than her heart could contain, yet it was as a single star in the array of the endless heavens compared to now. He met her eyes, smiling sweetly as he stroked her cheek and then kissed her briefly. He repositioned his body slightly sideways, long legs stretched completely across the spacious carriage interior so she could recline onto his chest. She dozed for short spells throughout the journey, snacking sporadically from the generous provisions while Darcy read. The trip was uneventful, their carriage arriving safely at the inn Darcy had secured near Northampton. From the unrelenting sun and jostling, Lizzy had a moderate headache, which she had successfully hid from her husband for the past hour. However, when she exited the carriage, Darcy aiding her, a flash of light reflecting off a glass window of the inn pierced her brain as a bolt. She cried in pain, reflexively released Darcy's hand to press palms to throbbing temples, and crumbled to her knees. "Elizabeth!" She was in his arms within the span of a heartbeat, Darcy barking orders that sent servants dashing to obey. It was all rather a daze to Elizabeth, her head hammering and stomach churning. In record time she found herself lying on a plush bed with a cold compress over her face, a frantic Darcy at her shivering side. "Here, my love, drink this. I do not believe you have consumed enough fluids today. An error of mine that I shall not repeat. Marguerite," he said, turning to Lizzie's maid standing nearby, "please retrieve Mrs. Darcy's blue gown and robe." He assisted Lizzie with the glass, unbuttoning her dress as she drank. "Darling, I will be fine in a moment," she began shakily, but he halted her by pushing the half-empty glass against her lips. "Hush now, Elizabeth. You need to rest. Drink. That is an order. And then you must sleep. I will have dinner brought to us later." "No, William. I will rest here as you wish, but you go and dine with Georgie. Spend the evening with her as we planned. Marguerite will stay with me." He started to protest, but she interrupted. "It is merely a headache from the light. My own stupidity for not shutting the shades is to blame. It will fade quickly. These headaches always do. You need to eat a complete meal." He argued further, but Marguerite assured him she would send for him if needed, and as Lizzie was already slipping into a doze, he reluctantly relented. By the time he returned several hours later, she was awake, had eaten a hearty dinner, and the headache had dissipated. She sat on the balcony gazing at the stars when he joined her. She nestled onto his lap, cuddling contentedly, and they talked in hushed tones. She appeared rested and in her usual lively humour, but he remained anxious for her health, internally chastising himself for not lowering the shades. He kissed the top of her head where it nestled so perfectly under his chin, his arms tightening around her body. "As delightful as it is to stargaze with you, I insist we retire. You need your rest for the remainder of our journey, and I will not risk the health of you or our child." "You worry unnecessarily, my love. The headache has vanished. I slept, so am well rested, ate an excellent dinner, and am currently blissfully embraced by my handsome husband. What more could a woman possibly want?" She smiled up at his anxious face, wiggled closer, nestled her face into his neck, and bestowed a light kiss. "Actually," another kiss, "I do have a marvellous idea," sliding one hand under the hem of his shirt, "for a final activity," nibbling on an earlobe, "to fully restore my health," slipping the tip of her tongue into his ear. "Elizabeth," he sighed, eyes shutting in pleasure, "we should wait until—" He gasped as a nipple was grazed. "Settled at Netherfield. Please—" Moans interrupted words as she firmly situated his hand on her breast, while lips travelled deliciously along his jaw. "Your headache could return, beloved. Listen to me." Lizzy stopped his voice by seizing his lower lip and sucking gently. Darcy moaned again, unconsciously rocking a burgeoning arousal into her bottom and rubbing her breast. "You talk too much, Fitzwilliam." "No one has ever accused me of that." She smiled and began seductively stroking and kissing him. He earnestly struggled to dissuade her, but to no avail. Lizzie's obstinacy was manifest in a myriad of ways, and one was when she desired him. Of course, Darcy never strived to avoid romantic activities with his wife, so was not well experienced in how to do so. Lizzy laughed at his stammering opposition and met passion-darkening eyes. "I want to love you, Fitzwilliam, any way you desire. I crave your touch on my skin and your body on mine. I hunger to bring you pleasure and show you how ardent my love for you is." She kissed his eager mouth passionately, overwhelming his senses with her breath and insistence. Pulling away finally, she whispered, "Take me to bed, my lover." He stared into her eyes for a moment longer, searching carefully for any residual pain or fatigue, but only sheer desire and love shone forth. With a sigh, gripping her securely in strong arms, he stood and entered their bedchamber. The inn's bed was not as large as Pemberley's or as fine, but it was comfortable. Darcy sat on the edge, lying his wife gently back onto the downy comforter, while kissing her lovely mouth. Pulling back mere inches, he stroked the hair from her face, twining silky tresses about his fingers as he gazed at her. "Elizabeth, you are incredibly beautiful. With each day your loveliness increases. I do not comprehend how it is possible, yet it is true." In typical Darcy fashion, he alternately caressed, kissed, and nibbled over each delicate facial feature, all the while murmuring endearments and praises for the beauty of his wife. Lizzie's eyes were closed, senses reeling with her husband's words of devotion and heated touch. Darcy paused at her lips, running feathery fingertips over her flesh, observing her rising passion with tremendous satisfaction and indescribable happiness. "Elizabeth," he whispered, "my wife, my lover," sliding his tongue over her lower lip as she sighed. "Mine forever, beloved," wet tip over the upper lip, then slowly sucking between his own. "Mrs. Darcy." Elizabeth had long succumbed to the amazing reality of her husband. The magnificence of his physique never failed to overwhelm her. His potent masculinity, virility, and stamina continually stunned her. The sensations they roused in each other at the tiniest touch, or even at a look, staggered her still, yet she embraced it as a heaven-gifted expression of the extraordinary bonding love they shared. After nearly 6 months of marriage, their passion only grew stronger, their love-making as necessary as breathing, with rarely a day passing without gratifying release and blissful devotion to the other achieved in some manner. They occasionally purposed to experiment with some new technique from the books or an imagined fantasy, yet usually their movements simply evolved naturally at the moment. Opportunities arose spontaneously and were latched onto with zeal, neither of them hesitant to try something new. Trust was unwavering, love unmatched, and desire to please the other first of paramount importance, selfless giving the central goal. Tonight was different only in Darcy's residual apprehension, which induced him to proceed in a reserved manner, despite Lizzie's clear desire for a wild interlude. In the end she did not care, their mutual rapture as blissful and blinding as always. Slowly, reality and strength returned to them both. Lizzy moved first, turning in his arms that encircled her shuddering damp skin, and bestowed a lingering kiss. "I love you," They spoke concurrently, then chuckled, kissing tenderly. Smoothing the tangled hair off her forehead, he kissed a perfectly arched brow. "Are you well, my love?"
"I am divine, but sleepy. Hold me, William."
"Forever, Elizabeth, forever." The next day dawned as bright and lovely as the previous one. Lizzy felt better than she had in the past week, not even a twinge of morning nausea. However, Darcy insisted on tarrying their departure to be sure. He kept the shades partially drawn, and had assured plenty of snacks and liquids packed in the carriage. Lizzy was so continually plied with cups of lemonade and water that frequent stops for physical necessities were required, prolonging the journey. Even so, they arrived at Netherfield by mid-afternoon, greeted enthusiastically by Charles and Jane. Lizzie's feet barely made contact with the solid earth before she was dashing into her sister's embrace. A short curtsied greeting to Mr. Bingley, and then the two women headed into the manor arm in arm, and heads touching as their words spilled over one another. "Well, Darcy, old chap," Mr. Bingley exclaimed by way of greeting, "there you have it. I believe we have been abandoned." Darcy smiled indulgently. "Only temporarily, Bingley. Surely they will exhaust their reminiscences and confidences in 3 or 4 days, and then come crawling back to their mere husbands." Bingley laughed. "Miss Darcy, I trust you are well. Was the trip too difficult?"
"I am perfect, Mr. Bingley, thank you, and the trip was easy."
They made their way into the house, Bingley asking after Lizzie's health. "She suffered a headache last evening, but today is well. They occur occasionally still, but with lessening intensity and frequency. The physician assures us it is to be expected." They had agreed to announce their news once the entire family was together that evening. Darcy privately doubted Lizzie's ability to keep their joy from her sister for even those few hours, but he would not renege on their vow.
"Mr. Bingley, have you prepared the same room for me as before?"
"Yes, Georgiana, we did. Your brother assured me this was your preference."
"Oh, yes, the view is amazing. Thank you, brother. Mr. Bingley, if you do not mind, I think I would like to rest a bit."
"Of course, dear." Darcy watched her mount the stairs with a smile. "I doubt she is the least bit tired, but male companionship is decidedly boring to a 17-year-old girl. I, on the other hand, am in need of a drink. Lead the way, Charles." Laughing, they made their way into the billiard-room, where Bingley poured a whisky for them both. Sitting onto a comfortably cushioned chair with a sigh of relief, Darcy studied his friend's face. "You look well, Bingley. Marriage agrees with you also, I presume." "Very much. I do not require asking you the same question, Darcy. It is evident. By the way, I prepared your room as you requested, the same room you inhabited on your previous visits. A single room." He paused, blushing mildly, the question unasked. Darcy placidly sipped his drink, gazing at Bingley with amusement, remaining silent. After a spell, Bingley continued, "Jane was concerned. There is a lovely bedchamber next to yours if—" "One room will be all that is necessary. I selected that bedchamber when you and I dwelt here last year based on the view and decor. Mrs. Darcy has similar tastes. She will appreciate it with the same enthusiasm, and I am aware of the attached dressing-room." He smiled at Bingley's ruddy face. "One bedchamber will be adequate." Bingley cleared his throat. "So tell me about the duel. I wish I could have witnessed the encounter." His eyes were bright with a youthful zeal. "I almost pity the fool who would willingly take you on, Darcy." Darcy smiled grimly, but proceeded to tell the tale. Down the hall in the parlour, Lizzy and Jane were sharing tea and sisterly conversation. They sat side by side on the sofa, chatting companionably, Lizzy sharing her version of the horrific events leading up to and including the duel. Jane shuddered.
"How awful, Lizzy! We were so worried. Papa wanted to leave for Pemberley immediately,
but Mamma was ill with anxiety and begged him to stay." Lizzy made a face but said nothing. Jane continued, "Fortunately, Mr. Darcy sent a second missive soon after, informing us of your recovery. Are you wholly restored?" "Headaches on occasion, that is all. The light, if it is too bright, pains me, but that is lessening. The doctor seems certain that it will resolve in time." Lizzy laughed. "Between my weakness and William's wounds, we have been quite the pair of invalids." Jane shuddered once again. "I do not know how you can jest, Lizzy. A duel with swords! I would faint away if Mr. Bingley did something so reckless." "I did not know until after the fact, and I scolded him, to be sure. Still, it is rather romantic, do you not think, Jane? Also, Ormond received his just reward." "Has he left Derbyshire?" "Yes. Apparently he has an estate in Devonshire. William crippled him. I do not imagine he will hurt any other women." "I must confess I cannot picture Mr. Darcy in such a manner. He is so proper and composed. Medieval duelling simply boggles my mind." Lizzy smiled. "I was not surprised in the least. Remember during our engagement how we shared our first kiss experiences, Jane?" Jane blushed and nodded. "I spoke then of William's enthusiasm, and you were shocked. Please, Lizzy, we should not speak of such things." "Oh, Jane, you are so silly. We are married women and sisters. If we cannot confide in each other, whom can we talk to?" Lizzy grasped Jane's hands. "I have so missed talking to you. There is no one on earth I can express my joy to as I can to you, dear sister. Are you and Mr. Bingley happy, Jane? You look happy. Please tell me you are as much as William and I." "Lizzy, we are extremely happy. But you know it is not my nature to enthuse as you do. You have always yearned for excitement and passion more so than I. There is no doubt you have found both with Mr. Darcy, despite his cool demeanour. Mr. Bingley and I are content and steady in our love, as well as quite joyful." "How is it living so close to Mamma? Tell me truthfully." Jane attempted to evade, but Lizzy laughed at her. "You say more with no words than with paragraphs, Jane. Truly, you and Mr. Bingley should move closer to us. William intends to discuss it with him. Would you not rather have your own home, Jane?" Jane seemed uncomfortable. "Charles and I have talked about this very matter, Lizzy. He would like to have his own home, our own home. The question is where. We both love it here, and Mamma would be so distressed if we left. Charles inquired about purchasing Netherfield, but the family does not wish to permanently part with it." Jane shook her head. "I leave these decisions to him. He will do what he believes is best." Lizzy would have continued the conversation, but the very topics of their discussion entered the parlour at that moment. Darcy went immediately to Jane. "Mrs. Bingley, my wife stole you away forthwith, and I did not have the opportunity to greet you properly." He bowed low over her hand. "Thank you, dear sister, for opening your home to us." Jane blushed prettily. They all departed then to dress for dinner. Lizzy, as Darcy anticipated, adored the rooms selected for them. They were not as plush or spacious as their chambers at Pemberley, but the decor was the same rustic tones they both preferred. When Lizzy rejoined her husband in the tiny sitting-room, it was to mutual approbation. Darcy, in blue as usual, wore the pale azure waistcoat Lizzy had gifted him at Christmas. He was incredibly handsome, and his eyes sparkled as he gazed in admiration at his wife. Lizzy wore a new but simple gown of lavender and gold chenille, with a Darcy strand of pearls around her neck, her lush hair elegantly coiffed by Marguerite, as always. Darcy kissed his wife's hand and then her cheek. "Are you well, beloved?" "Do you not ever tire of asking me that, Mr. Darcy?" she teased, and he laughed, clasping her arm in his as they exited the room. It was only 15 minutes later that the Bennet carriage arrived. Mrs. Bennet was honestly at a loss as to whom to gush over first.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?